Hey, what's going on, everybody? Today we're going to be setting up a SonicWall TZ series for the first time. And with these devices, you have to register it with a My SonicWall account and apply the licenses. So when you buy a SonicWall, you get the hardware itself, which has very limited capabilities. And then you have to register it and apply the licenses that you paid for. And these devices, they're not just a set it up and it's yours. You have to maintain active licenses, which can be purchased in like 1, 3, or whatever year quantities. But we're going to go through the initial setup, how to register it, how to apply the license, updating it, and also we're going to go through my kind of just personal baseline way to set it up. A lot of features and settings that I personally just like to enable. So let's go ahead and jump into this. So first thing, obviously, you got to plug in your new SonicWall, and then you can connect a PC to the X0 interface. So with SonicWalls, all of the interfaces are X0 through however many it has. In this case, we have a TZ270, so we only have 7 interfaces. This will vary depending on the model. Also, just because this is a TZ270 doesn't mean that this guide just applies to this specific model. Most SonicWalls run the same operating system, so as long as it's a TZ series, this video should apply to it. But I will note that other older models like TZ like 200 or TZ300, some of the older ones will run what's called Sonic OS version 6, and it will look a little bit different. These current models run OS 7, and while it'll probably look a lot different than the older ones, the settings are still roughly in the same place and the operation is still roughly the same. So you can apply this to a wide range of SonicWall models. You can even apply it to the NSA series, but the physical device of an NSA does have a couple little quirks that don't apply here on the TZ series. So once we've got our SonicWall plugged in, all we got to do is connect a configuration PC up to this X0 interface, which is always going to be your LAN interface. SonicWalls by default have X0 as LAN and X1 as your WAN. And all the other interfaces can be manually configured to whatever you want once it is up and running. So now that we're connected to X0, we can just verify the IP that we got. SonicWalls use 192.168.168.168 as their default management IP, and they do actually run a DHCP server by default. So you don't have to manually configure your network interface. You just plug it into X0. Your computer you're going to set it up with will receive an IP within this subnet, and then all you got to do is browse to the management page. So if we do an IP config here, just real quick, we can see that our test computer has grabbed 192.168.168.65. So let's go ahead and open up a web browser. And we're going to go to https 192.168.168.168. And then we're prompted with this SSL page. We'll go ahead and just bypass that. And here is our main login page for our SonicWall. And the default credentials are simply admin and password, all lowercase. And since this is the first time we're connecting to it, we can either launch the SonicWall setup guide or manually configure the SonicWall. I actually just like to manually configure it, but we can go ahead and go through the setup guide just so you can see this. All it really does is configure the WAN interface. So if we click on the setup guide, you can see it's going to take us through 3 steps, and that's setting up login credentials. Automatically, you're manually setting up the network configuration, and then review and confirm. This is all that the setup wizard is going to do for you. So if we click next, all it really asks for is a new admin password, which we can change. Click next, and then it's going to see if your WAN interface is connected and if it's going to pull a DHCP address. And in this case, we don't have that interface connected, so it's not going to pull anything. So it asks us to manually configure our WAN IP. And since this is all that this does, I'm just going to go ahead and exit it and configure manually. I just wanted to show you what the guide does. It's not really comprehensive. It just changes your admin credentials and sets up the WAN interface, which we can do both of those through our setup menus anyway. So we're going to start our manual configuration. Now, the first thing we want to do is register this device with my SonicWall. So what we're going to do is open a new tab and go to mysonicwall.com and log in using your SonicWall account credentials. If you don't have an account, just go ahead and hit sign up, create your account. This will just create you a portal basically for all of your SonicWall devices if you are going to have more than one. And you can manage a lot of stuff through here, like the firmware updates, your licensing options, and they even have some migration tools that you can use if you're going from a different firewall device to a SonicWall, which will kind of just take and translate the configuration from multiple other vendors to a SonicWall easily for you. That is a whole other topic in itself. I actually don't like those wizards, but that's something to talk about another day. So let's go ahead and log in to our SonicWall account. And we have two-factor set up on this, so I've just got to check my email, get this code, and put that in, and then click verify. And here's our dashboard. Now, the section that we're concerned with is really just products. So if we go to products on the left here, this will list all of the products that are currently registered with this SonicWall account. And you can see I already have two in here. This NVV was a trial for a software firewall, so that's not even active. And then this is one of the SonicWalls I already use in my network. So to get this new one set up, we're just going to click on register products, and we have to choose a tenant. So by default, you already have one tenant set up. You can add more if, for example, you're managing SonicWalls for more than just yourself, which we will not be doing. So let's go ahead, click our Toasty Answers tenant, and then it asks for the serial number of the device. So if we go back to our SonicWalls web management, right here on the system dashboard page, we have a serial number. We'll go ahead and copy that, paste that in here, and then it asks for two more pieces of information. That is the authentication code and a friendly name. So the authentication code is directly below the serial number in the web management. Go ahead and copy that, paste it in there, and then give it a friendly name. And this will be just a way to identify it within this SonicWall portal. This doesn't actually change any configurations on the device itself. This is simply just so that you know what you're looking at when you come into this portal. So I'm just going to call it Toasty's Firewall, and then continue to choose management options. Now, some models or versions of firewall can have cloud management or an on-premise, what's called a GMS server. These are both grayed out because this account has not bought either of those features. So our only option here is on-box, which is typical for 99% of these deployments. So we'll go ahead and click done. Now at this point, our SonicWall is tied to our MySonicWall account, but it is not licensed for anything. So what we have to do is go to the licenses tab of our firewall. If this doesn't automatically pop up, you just look in your products page, Toasty's Firewall, click on the serial number of that device, and go to the licenses tab. And this will show you pretty much every feature that you have and what can be used. And right now, since ours is just plain out of the box, everything is unlicensed except for SSL VPN and Global VPN client. These are the licenses that every SonicWall has out of the box. And this is pretty much all you can use it for besides basic routing. So we've got one SSL VPN license straight out of the box, which means we can only have one SSL VPN connection at a time without purchasing more. And then this count next to it is the maximum you could possibly buy for this device. And then Global VPN client is also another external VPN connection type, and it comes with 5 concurrent connections out of the box with a maximum of 200. So to license the features that we want, we just need to pull up the email or whatever document we got when we purchased this thing, which has our license code. So this is going to vary for you, but usually when you purchase this, you get an email that includes your license code. So go ahead and find that and copy that into here. So I just found my activation email, copy that code, and we're just going to paste it up here in the top right and click activate. And now we can see our features have changed. The Essential Protection Service Suite is now licensed, as well as gateway malware, antivirus, IPS, yada yada. And we also have support. And you can see that these licenses have an expiration date. So January 12th, 2027 is when these will basically stop working. And at that point, we would need to have a renewal for those licenses and apply that to the SonicWall itself. So now we can start configuring the SonicWall itself. However, just because it is licensed in here does not mean that our actual SonicWall knows that it is licensed. So we're going to have to apply this to our actual SonicWall. And there's two ways to do this. Down here on the device summary page, you can see device registration is needed, register device. If we click this, it'll prompt you for a My SonicWall login. So this is one way to license and register your SonicWall. You can either try to directly log in to your My SonicWall account from the firewall, or there's what's called a manual key set. Now, logging into your My SonicWall account obviously requires that the SonicWall be connected to the internet. Now, in our situation, we only have X0 plugged in to a little setup PC. It doesn't have an internet connection yet. So if we try to do this, just type in my info here and click register, it's going to say failure because there's a connectivity issue. Yeah, it has to have an internet connection and it has to be able to resolve DNS. So we're not able to actually use this with the way that we're configuring ours. Now, if yours does have an internet connection, you can just simply log into your My SonicWall account. It's going to look for this entry, see that you've already registered it to My SonicWall, and it's going to apply all the licenses automatically. And actually, this is the way that you should do it, is connected to the internet. I'm actually coming back after editing this video and throwing this part in. There is a difference between using the mysonicwall.com automatic registration and the manual registration, which I'll get to here in a minute. So if you do a manual registration with just the key set, again, I'll show you here in just a second, it also assumes that you're going to manually download the databases for all of your security services. So for things like antivirus, botnet, GeoIP filtering, your SonicWall will not automatically download the databases for those rules if you only do a manual registration. And I'm just going to show you here real quick what I mean by that. And on the home page here, this SonicWall is a different one from the rest of the video, but it is registered using the manual key set method. And if we go to the Security Services tab here on the dashboard, we can see that our Gateway Antivirus Signature Database not downloaded. Cloud Antivirus was last checked, never. Signature Database also not downloaded. And if we click to download these databases, it says that the changes were made, but if we refresh, it's still not downloaded. So here, GeoIP filtering and botnet do say that they were downloaded somehow, but the overall license sync state is not successful. But if we go to our licenses tab, you can see we're licensed for everything. So the way you really should register this is via My SonicWall. So if you are setting this up and you just don't have an internet connection, the manual licensing is fine, just so you can turn on all of these security services and get it pre-staged. But once it's in place, you do want to actually sync it to mysonicwall.com to make sure that it downloads everything that it needs to download and is synced. So I'm just going to go ahead and put in my SonicWall information, click register. Product registration is successful. If this was the first time registering the device, it would prompt me for a reboot, but since it's already manually registered, I don't have to do that. But since it's synced with my SonicWall, if we go back to the home page and security services, we can see that the Gateway Antivirus has download in progress, as well as anti-spyware, IPS, and application control. And you can also see that our sync state is successful. So if we refresh this page, now all of our databases are downloaded. So just wanted to come back and say, definitely use the MySonicWall sync method for registration at some point if you want all of these to be downloaded, because it's going to expect you to manually update these databases if it is not synced with mysonicwall.com. And now we can go into the manual registration method that I've been talking about. Now, to do this without an internet connection, we just go over to My SonicWall, and there's this little thing called Manual Upgrade here in the Licenses tab. And if we drop that down, we can click Add Key Set to your product, and that will pop up this massive key that we can copy to clipboard and import to our device. So if we go back to our SonicWall, under the Licenses section, we just got to exit out of our My SonicWall login and click this Manual button here in the top right. And then we just have to paste our key set in and click Apply. It's going to say that a restart is required. So, yep, let's go ahead and reboot this SonicWall and wait roughly, 2 to 3 minutes for it to reboot. And once the device has finished rebooting, it'll automatically refresh the page for you to log in again. So let's just go back, admin and password. And it should take you right back to the licenses page where you can now see we are licensed for our various features. And it'll also say at the top what tenant you're under, the friendly name of the firewall, as well as your My SonicWall information here, which should be blurred out for obvious reasons. Now that our SonicWall is registered and licensed and all that, we can begin the baseline configuration, but what I like to do first is make sure that the firmware is on the latest edition. So what we have to do is go under Device, Settings, Firmware, and Settings here on the left, and this will tell us what version our SonicWall is currently running, which is Sonic OS 701-5095- the release version. So we just have to compare this to the latest available for download, and that is located in your My SonicWall portal. So let's exit out of this key set that we had open and go to the Firmware tab of this device, and it already tells us that there's an updated release available. And to see these releases, they're just down here at the bottom under available downloads. So we have two options here. We've got 7.1.1, 7040, or 701, 5145. Now, both of these are newer. This really just comes down to whether or not you want to jump to the next major release. So 701, this is the last version of 7.0. And then this is the newest version on 7.1. So we're going to go ahead and just go with the newest. So we're going to download this file right here, 7.1.1, 740. And once that is finished downloading, we can upload it to our device and start the firmware upgrade. And now that is finished, so let's go back to our SonicWall, which we've been logged out of. Go ahead and log back in. By default, your SonicWall will kick you out after 5 minutes of inactivity. So just be aware of that, and that will be something that we're going to update here in just a minute. So back on the Firmware and Settings tab of our SonicWall, we just click on Upload Firmware here in the top right. It says before uploading, make sure you have a backup. Yeah, we just started configuring this, so I'm not too concerned with a backup. And all we have to do here is just browse to our firmware file. So downloads, upload the firmware that you just downloaded, and click Upload. So this will put it on the device, and it'll be up to you to determine when you want to reboot it for the upgrade. And obviously, since this is just set up here on the bench and not being used for anything, we're going to go ahead and do that right now. All right, we got the success screen, and now it's reloading our firmware and settings page, where we can see we have a current firmware version and an uploaded firmware version. So all we have to do to get this to our uploaded is click the little power icon over here, and we have the option to boot the uploaded firmware with current config or factory default. This, I always think, is a scary option because when you're dealing with one that is in production already, it is super easy to just click factory default and lose all your settings. But we're going to go ahead and make sure we click with current configuration, and it gives us the warning. We hit OK, and it'll reboot again. So we just have to wait for this to reboot, and it'll come back up with the new firmware. And we are now rebooted. We are reconnecting to the device, and we actually get the warning that it is still rebooting. So when this page refreshes, if the device isn't done, it'll just wait another additional 20 seconds, try to reconnect, and so on and so forth. All right, and we are finally rebooted. That actually took an additional like 5 minutes. So let's log back in and just verify that we are on the new firmware. And I'm assuming it is because it is now asking us to change the admin password. So let's go ahead and put in just password, which is default, and change that. Click change password, and we'll be redirected to the dashboard again, where we can see our firmware version on the dashboard is 7.1.1-740. So we were successful in upgrading the firmware, and now we can actually get to configuration. So first thing we're going to hit is actually the cloud backup. So if we navigate to device at the top, back to firmware and settings, and then to the cloud backups tab, here we have a slider to enable cloud backups. That is just something I like to do. It will periodically upload backups to your My SonicWall account, which we can restore later. Now, the next place we're going to go is administration, still under settings, and we're going to change the firewall name. And this is really just for quality of life. By default, the firewall has a name or a host name of its serial number. So I just like to change this to match the friendly name that we gave it in my SonicWall.com, and that is just so that we can look at a name that actually makes sense to us. And the firewall domain name, if you have a domain, you can go ahead and put it in here. So like toasty.local. And if we didn't already update the admin password, we would go down here and change that, but it had us change it upon login, so we're not going to worry about it. And we're just going to go ahead and click accept to save these settings. Now the next place we're going to go is login multiple administrators, and we're going to change login admin after inactivity to like 30 minutes instead of 5. This is just so it doesn't constantly kick you out while you're maybe researching something or trying to pull info from somewhere else and you're not actively in the GUI. I find that 5 minutes is way too short and I'm constantly getting logged out and have to log back in. So I just set this a bit higher to like 30 minutes so that doesn't happen. Go ahead and click accept to save those changes. And then we're going to go to the management tab. And this is where you can set your ports for HTTPS and HTTP management. HTTP should be off by default. We're going to go ahead and keep it that way. But we are going to change these ports to something like 444 and say 81 for HTTP, even though that isn't doing anything. And this is just to be a little bit more secure, especially if we're going to open management to the outside on the WAN interface. Just not using the default 443 as a port is just a little bit more work for somebody to figure out. It's not impossible, but anything we can make harder for other people to get into our stuff is good to do. So we're going to go ahead and click accept, and this should stop us. Yeah, error occurred. It's going to stop us from using the GUI because technically we have changed. Our GUI is no longer located on the default 443. So we have to change our URL to 192.168.168.168:444 to get back in. We'll go ahead and log back in using our new username and password, and we can continue making some changes. Now, something else that does is, since the management is no longer on 443, if we are going to use SSL VPN, we can actually use 443 for our virtual office connections, which is something that'll be in another video later. But anyways, the next thing we want to change is also under device and settings, and that is the time. By default, this comes with Pacific time as the time zone, so we're just going to update this to where we are, Central Time, US and Canada, and we'll make sure that NTP is enabled, which it is by default, so we can go ahead and click accept. If we want to use custom NTP servers, we can input them over here. We're not going to worry about that because the SonicWall has its own NTP servers by default. And this is really just to correct the log times and to make sure everything syncs up. Because if you're going back and you're troubleshooting an issue, looking through the logs and the time is like 3 hours off, then that's more mental work for you to try and figure out exactly when something happened. And those are really the basic settings that we need to set this up. Now we can kind of go into the actual security configuration, which will be under policy, I believe, and security services on the left here. Now we're basically just going to go down this list and enable all of these that we're licensed for, which is most of them. If we go to the summary tab, you can just kind of see a quick summary. There's an enhanced security features and proxy configuration. We're not going to worry about any of this. We're going to go down to gateway antivirus and we're going to turn that on. And then we click accept and we've now enabled that service. So we'll go down to anti-spyware, do the same thing. Toggle that on, click accept, and now that it's enabled, we can configure the high, medium, and low priority. So what I like to do is just prevent all high priority spyware, also detect, and for medium and low, I'm only going to check detect. So the firewall will actively block anything it considers high priority, and anything medium and low, it's not actually going to block it, but it is going to throw a log entry that says that it was detected. So go ahead and accept those changes, move down to intrusion prevention. This is the exact same thing. We're going to toggle that on, click accept, and then prevent high priority attacks and detect the rest. Click accept. Move down to GeoIP filter. This is one that I like to configure on all my firewalls. And how you configure this comes down really to where you're located or what all you are wanting to block and how paranoid you are. So we're going to toggle block connections to from countries in the countries tab. We're going to click accept, and then we are going to browse to that countries tab and start filling out our blocked countries. Now, what I like to do is use the top 10 spam countries as a baseline. So if we just Google top spam countries. The number one result is the Spam House project, top 10 worst countries. These are pretty much all the ones that I put in my lists. But there are exceptions to this. So for example, I'm not going to block the United States of America because that's where I am. I'm also not going to block Germany because I know that there has been some issues with TeamViewer connections coming through a Germany server. So depending on what services you are using, what websites you are going to, some of these countries you might want to leave off because they might host something that could be critical to you. For example, I know for a client, I've configured France as a blocked country, but their ordering software went through France. So your mileage may vary, and you could very well break stuff with GeoIP filtering. So just keep that in mind. So we'll go back to firewall management, and we're going to throw these countries in there, as well as some additional ones that I just like to do anyway. So simply search the country and then click the arrow to move it to the blocked list. I'm just going to go through the list with all the ones I typically put in here. And this is the configuration I typically use. And there are more than 10 on this list. There's just some that are personal preferences of mine to block, and also some that are on other lists like Romania. I know that there's been quite a few issues coming from Romania. They're not on the top 10 list, but I like to throw them in here anyways. And also, I do configure France, even though I have had that ordering software issue, but that was specific to a single client. So I'll start off with all of these countries, and then if the specific client has an issue, we'll start backing it off from there. And we also have at the bottom the option to block all unknown countries. So if an IP address isn't classified as any country, it's going to be blocked automatically. I just leave that on. And then we also have the option for GeoIP exclusion object. We haven't created any of these, but you can select a certain IP or a certain address object or whatever to be excluded from this configuration. So if you have like a test PC or something in the DMZ that you don't want this to apply to, you can add it here. But we're going to go ahead, click accept for these changes, and then move down to our botnet filter configuration. This is basically the same thing. Go ahead, turn on connections from command and control servers and click to accept. And there's really no other configuration that we need to do here unless we want something like a custom botnet list or something else like that. Now, one of the main configurations to note on both GeoIP filter and botnet filter is the option to block all connections to public IPs if either one of these databases is not downloaded. Now, a lot of people like to turn these on. Basically, if your SonicWall cannot reach out and pull the latest list for botnet or GeoIP filtering, it'll just stop blocking everything. And I've seen this screw up quite a lot where the SonicWall can't download the list, so your entire site's down. And for that reason, I just like to leave this disabled. But if you are really security conscious, you can turn that on. Just be aware that if for some reason your SonicWall cannot reach the servers that contain these lists, you're basically going to be dead in the water until you can get in there and turn that off. And the last security service we're going to enable is content filter. We are going to skip over app control. We are licensed for it, but this is something that I usually never mess with. So we're just going to skip it and go down to content filter. And really the configuration we're going to do here is not actually under this section. So we have content filter enabled by default. That is all we need to check in this tab. Where we need to go from here is actually to Object tab, and we're going to go down to Profile Objects and Content Filter. And under here is where we have our actual content filter configuration. This is where you would configure things like your allowed URI list, your forbidden URI list, and then the categories that you're wanting to block with content filter. Now, all of these are configured by default. We can customize these later, but that's not going to be a part of this video. We're just going to click on the edit button for this entry, and we're going to go to the advanced section where we enable HTTPS content filtering. I cannot state how many times I've seen a SonicWall deployed where content filtering is something that you really want to use and is really important, but this box is not checked. And when HTTPS content filtering is not enabled, your content filter is barely doing anything at all because it's only going to filter straight HTTP requests, and the majority of traffic on the internet is HTTPS. So this is definitely an option you want to have enabled if you are actually going to be using content filtering. And I'm actually not sure why that isn't a default option, but here we are, it is not. And that really concludes the security services configuration. Now we can move on to some of the more network-based configuration. So we're going to go over to our network tab here on the top. And this is really going to depend on how you are configuring your network. Usually when I'm deploying a SonicWall, we have multiple different networks to service. One of them is your default LAN, which is right here, X0, which we'll be modifying. And then I also have usually a voice network and a guest network. And what I like to do for these is add custom zones. So on a SonicWall, basically everything is managed through a zone type and then address objects or groups. So your firewall rules are really set up between zones. So like, for example, WAN cannot talk directly to LAN, but LAN can talk to WAN. And this is all configured in the firewall rules, which we haven't got to yet. So I like to configure additional ones, one for guest and one for voice, just so that we can segregate this traffic a bit more and have a little bit more granularity in how we configure access rules. Now, I actually don't see zone in this area, so I think it's under object. I actually prefer the old interface to this one, which if you're curious, you can go to the top right, click on this administrator bubble, and change from contemporary to the classic UI. And if you're used to working with SonicWalls, say like older versions, this puts everything back into the order that you're probably used to. This is where I like to spend most of my time, but just for the purposes of this video, we're going to use the new interface since that's what SonicWall wants us to do anyway. So zones, let's go see if they're under the object area. And yep, they are. So under object, match objects, zones, this is where we can configure additional zones if we want to. Now, again, if you're only running a one network, you don't got to worry about creating additional zones. This is just something that I typically do for different services. So the first one I'm going to create is voice. Security type is going to be trusted because this is going to be an internal network. It's going to be our phones. We'll allow the interface trust. And I do like to enable all the security services for the zone. This really is not too necessary for voice, and it can also cause some problems with voice traffic. All the overhead required to apply these against just voice traffic can be a little overkill. So really, these are optional, but we're going to go ahead and save this new zone. And we can see it shows up down here, and the settings are basically mirrored from the LAN zone. Now, the next one we're going to make is guest, and we're going to give that a security type of public, not trusted. We're going to leave interface trust disabled. And again, I like to enable the services, even for the guest network, but that is entirely up to you. So we're going to go ahead and click save. Now we have our guest network, but it is not an interface trust, and the security type is public. And we can verify kind of what this trusted and public stuff does if we go to our policy tab and our access rules. So each of these zone types have default firewall rules. So for example, public is not going to be able to go to any trusted network, but trusted networks can go into public. So if we look at our zone matrix selector here and select any traffic, say going from voice to LAN, you can see we have an action of allow. But if we change this from guest to LAN, we have an action of deny, and that is because of the difference in the zone type. Now, I'm not going to get too deep into this. This is probably something for another video. So let's go ahead and keep baselining the network configuration. And we're going to start by going to network and then interfaces. And this is your primary window that you're probably going to spend the most time looking at because this is all of your interface configs. Now, you probably don't want to leave X0 as 192.168.168.168. So to change this, we're just going to hover over it, click edit this interface, and we're going to change the IP assignment. So we're going to keep it static, but we're going to use 192.168.40.1. And that's going to be our IP for our X0 interface. We can go ahead and attach our domain name to that as well. And for management options down here, HTTPS management and ping are enabled by default. I do like to turn on SSH to the LAN just because if I need to SSH, I'm probably doing it from the LAN. And then the advanced tab, we don't really have to worry about anything under here. So we can just click OK, and that's going to automatically update our X0 configuration. And we are going to lose connection to our SonicWall because our IP changed. Now, the good news is when you edit X0 interface, it will automatically update your DHCP server. So you don't have to worry about changing the IP address on X0 and then being like, well, crap, it had DHCP on it. Now I've got to manually set my IP and reconnect. No, all you got to do is renew. So let's go to our command prompt, ipconfig release and ipconfig renew. And apparently that requires elevation. So let's run that as administrator. All right, and once our virtual machine loads back, if we do another ipconfig, we can see we got an IP of 40.205. So let's go ahead and log back into our SonicWall with the new IP that we set, 192.168.40.1. Oh, and we changed the port to 444, so we got to remember, put that on the end. Go past the SSL warning and log in. Now for the other interfaces under network and interfaces, obviously you're probably going to want to configure your WAN, but if this is a home connection or any type of dynamic internet connection that's going to use DHCP, by default X1, the WAN interface, is going to be set to use DHCP. But if you need a static address, you just go into that interface, change this to static, and you can input your IP address, mask, gateway, and your custom DNS servers if you'd like. But this is going to depend on what kind of internet connection you have, whether or not you're assigned a static IP or not. So for our purposes, we're just going to leave that as it is, because we're going to be using a DHCP connection. Also, I guess one more note, if you need to, you can go into advanced and change the MAC address. I know, some connections will require you spoof the MAC in order for it to work with your own equipment, but that's where that setting is in case you need to do that. And just another note while we're here, typically when I configure these, we have about 3 or 4 different interfaces that'll be configured. So I'll have X0 as the LAN, just the main network for the site. X1 obviously is WAN. And then X2 and X3 would be like guest and voice. So if we wanted to set that up, we could go in here, assign it to those zones that we just created. So we'll put this on our guest zone and give that an IP address of something like 192.168.41.1. And since it's a guest interface, we're going to leave all of these off, well, except ping, just because we might want to troubleshoot, and then hit OK. And then to assign our voice network, we just do the same thing for X3, go into edit, assign that the voice zone, and give it an IP address. We'll do 100.1 for our voice network, because that's typically what I like to use. You can give it a comment, which is optional, and we'll enable ping on that as well. Now you can do sub interfaces on the SonicWall, just like on other routers, and to do that, we just go up to add interface, and we'll do virtual interface. And this will give us basically our VLAN interface. Assign it a zone, we'll just say LAN, give it a VLAN tag 10, for example. Parent interface, we'll assign it to X0, so it'll be a part of the LAN, and then you give it the IP configuration as normal. So 192.168. We'll do 45.1 for this network. And we'll just say that this is like a secondary internal or something. Actually, maybe internal wireless would make a little more sense in this context. And we'll go ahead and enable HTTPS management and ping, since this is going to be an internal network, and we'll manage the SonicWall on it, just as an example. So we'll hit OK, and there we go. We've got X0V10. That means it's a virtual interface, and it is looking for traffic tag on VLAN 10. Typically, I like to put each network on its own interface if possible, but there's also the occasions where sub-interfaces are extremely useful as well. But let's move on from interface configuration and go into the failover and load balancing. So this really only matters if you have more than one WAN connection, and that's over here on the left, failover and LB. And we'll go to the groups tab. And here we have what's called the default load balancing group. So by default, X1 is a part of this group, and the status is, well, not the status, but the method is a basic failover. So if you have more than one internet connection, you can come in here and change the load balancing type from like basic failover, round robin, spillover, or ratio. But what you really want to look at when you have two WAN connections is that they're in the right order. So if they're in failover mode, the one that's on top is going to be your primary, and then the one on the bottom is basically going to be your secondary failover. So let's go ahead. I'm going to go back to the interfaces and just assign X4 as another WAN interface. And we'll say that's DHCP as well. We'll hit OK. Yeah, that just warns us that web management is turned off. That's okay. And then if we go back to failover and load balancing and groups, you can see we still only have X1 in here. So the other one doesn't automatically get added to this group. We have to go into configure and find our other WAN interface and move that over into the group. So that is why if you have more than one WAN interface, you want to come to this tab and make sure that you throw it into this group so that it'll actually start functioning as a failover. And then if you want to, you can change it from failover to something else, but that's outside the scope of this video. The main point is just to make sure all your WAN interfaces is in your load balancing group if you want them to actually function like that. Now, the next thing we're going to hit up is the DHCP server for our various networks we made. So DHCP server here on the left, and we're going to go to the DHCP server lease scopes tab. And you can see we have this one for interface X0, 40.2 and 40.254 is our range. If we go into this, hit the little edit button, we can change this. I like to use 100 to 199, but that's just me. And I also like a lease time of 480, which is 8 hours. And we can also change our DNS settings in the DNS Wins tab. By default, it's just going to inherit the settings from the SonicWall's DNS settings itself, which we've yet to look at, but I will show you where that is in a second. And then the advanced tab, we can assign VoIP call managers, boot settings, yada yada. The main thing here is on the voice network, we would use the DHCP generic options. If we have phones that need to be assigned TFTP servers via option, oh shoot, I forget the option, but I think it's 67 or something like that. If you need to push that, it would be pushed here for the scope itself. And these option groups and objects are actually configured back here on the DHCP server settings tab under advanced. So if we need an option for our voice network, we can add one here. Go down, oh, it's option 66, not 67. Put in the option name and our TFTP server address. Save that, and then we can actually apply it to our scope. But let's go ahead and create our new scopes under DHCP server lease scopes, add dynamic, and we can pre-populate this from an interface. So if we go down to the bottom, interface pre-populate, let's select interface X2, which was our guest network that we configured, and that automatically fills out all of these fields, and we can just change them to what we prefer. So 100 to 199 again with the lease time of 480. And we're going to have this one not inherit DNS settings from the SonicWall. We'll just say 8.8.8.8 and 8.8.4.4 because we want our guests to only use public DNS servers and not any of our internal devices if that's what we're going to configure on the SonicWall itself. Now the last scope, add dynamic, interface pre-populate. We'll select X3, which is our voice network. Again, change this 100 to 199 and 480 just to match the other ones. And then DNS, we'll leave that alone. But under advanced, if we go to that generic option group, we can select our voice group, which will push that option 66 that we configured in the other tab. We'll click OK. Now for that VLAN 10 interface, let's try and do something that is usually pretty simple on other devices. And here comes one of mine and probably everybody else's main complaint about using a SonicWall, and that is reservations. So you can see we have the option for dynamic and static. If we need to add a static DHCP entry, which is essentially a reservation, we can name it something like my PC. We can give it a static address, 192.168. We'll say 40.150. We can put in the MAC address. I'll just use all A's for example. Set the lease time, the default gateway, and all of that. This basically sets which interface it's going to be on, or we can select pre-populate. And since .40 is in the X0, we can select that. And now this should create us a reservation for our MAC address, all A's, which doesn't exist. But if it did, it would get the IP address 40.150. But watch this. If we click OK, oh, it overlaps with entry 40.2 to 40.254, which also, apparently I didn't hit save when I updated that from 100 to 199. But anyways, you cannot create a reservation which is a part of an existing scope. Why SonicWall did this, I have no idea. But in order to do reservations, you have to have multiple dynamic scopes, and then all of your static entries have to be outside of those. So let me just do an example on that last VLAN 10 interface. Let's say we have a dynamic range on interface X0 VLAN 10, and we want 150 to be our reserved IP. We've got to make a range, which is 100 to 149. We'll do a lease time of 480. Go ahead, click OK. Then add our static in, IP 192.168.45.150. Give it Ethernet address of all A's again, and then click OK. And then finish our scope out with another dynamic for the same interface from 151 to 199. This is the absolute dumbest thing I've ever seen for DHCP, but that is how you have to do it on a SonicWall. Unless somebody else has a wizard way and has figured out how to do this without splitting scopes, this is the only way I know how to do it. So we have our two scopes for 45, 100 to 149, and then we have 151 to 199 with our static or reservation here in the middle. And if we want to make another reservation, say for 179, then we got to go in, delete that scope, make two more scopes, and it gets really extremely messy really quickly. So moral of that story is, I guess, basically avoid reservations or only reserve them outside of this limited scope, which I like to do anyway. So if I did reservations on any of these, it would be like 41, 1 through 99, or 200 to 254. Now let's talk about that DNS that I was supposed to cover. I'm actually on a different SonicWall right now because I'm coming back and doing this after I've already edited the video. But I realized that I said I was going to talk about the SonicWall's local DNS, and I never actually mentioned it. So with these DHCP ranges, when you're setting them up and you go into DNS, your two options are to inherit it dynamically from SonicWall's DNS or to specify manual. So this SonicWall DNS is what I've been talking about, and this is what we're going to take a look at. And you can see on this SonicWall, I already have two DNS servers, 10.8.8.8.8, 244, and 240. These DNS servers were actually gotten through our WAN interface via DHCP. So if you're on your ISP's connection and you're using DHCP configuration on your WAN interface, that's basically your SonicWall's DNS configuration by default. But to actually see this, let's go to Network and then DNS Settings. So these are the DNS settings for the SonicWall itself. So not for any clients connected to it, just for the SonicWall to do its own name resolution for like downloading databases or whatever. And by default, it's set to inherit dynamically from the WAN zone. So whatever DNS settings you have on your WAN interface, that's what your SonicWall is going to use by default. So in my case, on my WAN interface, I am getting these two DNS servers through DHCP. And on my DHCP scope, if I leave that set to inherit, then all of my clients are also going to get these two DNS servers through DHCP. Now, if I want to override that, I can just switch to specify manual DNS servers and click accept. And now I've changed the DNS servers that my SonicWall itself is going to use. And you would think that this would trickle down into DHCP. DHCP says it's inheriting from the SonicWall itself. However, for some reason, even if you specify it manually here, if you go back to DHCP server, it actually doesn't change it to that. And I manually updated the WAN interface to static. So now it's 8.8.4.4 and 1.1.1.1 if you inherit dynamically. Apparently, this setting just inherits dynamically from the WAN interface and not SonicWall's DNS settings, which is a little counterintuitive and misleading, and I'm not sure if that's a bug or a feature. But moral of that story is if you have your DHCP scopes set to inherit the DNS settings, then all of your clients are going to get whatever's on the WAN interface, basically. So you would have to change that here. And if you don't want your clients to just use whatever DNS server you have set here, especially if it's, say, DHCP, I'll go ahead and just change this back to DHCP, then you should probably just use the specify manually. But that is pretty much how you set up a SonicWall for the first time. There are other things that I like to do, which is typically configuring SSL VPN and site-to-site VPNs, but I'll make a separate video on those. So the last thing we're going to talk about is just a few finishing touches that I like to do. First off, if you didn't change your administrator password or you weren't prompted to, then go ahead and go back to device administration and change the password, which we've already done that because it prompted us to do it automatically. But if it didn't, don't forget to update that. And also, if you want to be able to manage this over the WAN, we can go to Network, Interfaces, and go and edit our main WAN interface, which is X1. And there's an option down at the bottom here to enable HTTPS management. Now, when you do this, that's going to open up anybody who knows your public IP to try and log in to that interface, as long as they know or can detect that it's on port 444. So what you will want to do if you're going to enable WAN management is lock this down to either a single IP or a single network or a group of IPs. So firewall rule to lock this down, which I'm going to cover in another video. So watch out for that one where I go over how to actually set the rule. For now, I'll just disable it since I'll assume we don't know how to do that. So that's how you set up a SonicWall for the first time. Basically, you register it and then you do all of your basic setup. What I like about them is that they have DHCP on the X0 interface where you set it up, so you don't have to worry about manually setting your IPs or switching interfaces to a different interface after you've configured it, anything like that. But they do certainly have their own little quirks and weird things that you gotta get around sometimes. But anyways, before I ramble on too long, look out for the rest of the videos for setting up SonicWall with SSL VPN, regular IPsec VPN, and then the firewall rules. But for now, we will leave it here. As always, happy networking.